Hi everyone! Today we're going to talk about the source evaluation sheet. This is your worksheet that shows me what sources you are going to use for your research paper. It's very important that this is filled out correctly and that you find strong sources for your paper that you can include. So I'm going to take you step by step through this process and show you some examples and give you some advice on how to find credible sources. So let's get started. Here we have our source evaluation sheet. As I scroll down, you can see that there are 10 sources that you can find for your paper. I always suggest finding as much as you can because it's easier to take away than to add later on in the writing process. However, for this assignment, I expect to see at least 4. So we're going to start off up top here, and I'm going to go through one source with you. Now, the first thing we want to do before we actually start researching is add our topic and our topic sentence. This is important to have up top because it'll keep your focus as you're finding all these sources. So I'm going to add my example topic and topic question now. So now that I have my topic question written down, I want to make sure that my sources are related to it or related to what I'm going to talk about in the paper. For this example, I think a great source to start out with first is something that generalizes what happened during this time period. I know I'm going to narrow my focus in my paper, but I am going to include some history and background information on the Great Depression. Therefore, I think this is a great first source to start with, and I'll get into why it's credible towards the end. So now that I have my first source, I'm going to include the title and the URL in the first 2 slots. If you're using a book or a magazine interview, anything that's not on the internet, then you would not include the URL in this section. Our next section focuses on the main idea of the entire article. Therefore, I'm going to take some time to read through this and generalize what this is about. This can be around 1 to 2 sentences that basically just gives me an idea of what the article is without telling me every single detail in it. Next, I'm going to add 3 facts that I think are strong enough to include in my paper. This section is so important because these are the quotations that you are going to include in your actual research paper that you will analyze later. Let's look at one example here. I found this quote to be very important to how it affected Americans and what happened during that time. So by 1933, when the Great Depression reached its lowest point, some 15 million Americans were unemployed and nearly half the country's banks had failed. That's perfect. That tells me how Americans were affected, it's coming from a reliable source, and that's a quotation that I feel comfortable enough to put in my paper and expand on further. So I'm going to add that in that section. I also added 2 more quotes in this section since I said that we need at least 3 that I kind of summarized, put the ellipses through just because they were longer quotes. That's completely okay. As long as I'm able to look up those quotes and see word for word that they are from the article, you can use the ellipses. So for the time being, I added those in, and you can pause this video and research this topic on your own if you want to read more about it. Last, I mentioned earlier that I was holding off to talk about why this is credible, mostly because this is the part that my students struggle with the hardest, and it's the last section in this Source 1 block. History.com has been around for a while, and there are so many articles on this specific website that deal with history. So on top of it not being something that was created last month, I know it's credible because of the sources that are inside the article as well. If there were a ton of links to blogs or opinionated YouTube videos, then I don't think it would be that credible. But since this is an article that is talking about factual information that happened in the past on a well-known website, I believe this is credible. So I'm going to add that in my section below. So that wraps up this example video on how to create a source for your source evaluation sheet. Send me a message if you want to work on this together or if you have any questions. Thank you for watching. See you next time.